Hi, this is Bill Kenower, and today I'd like to talk to you about the intentional arc. The intentional arc is the third of the three narrative arcs present in every story. The first arc is the physical arc. This is every single thing that is said and done throughout the course of the story. The second arc is the emotional arc. This is how all the characters change or do not change throughout the course of the story. But the intentional arc is why the story was told, what gift the writer is trying to give the reader. It's a little harder to teach than the physical and the emotional arc, because the physical arc and the emotional arcs progress linearly through time as the story is told. But the intentional arc, hopefully, is present equally throughout all parts of the story. It is the glue that holds the story together. Now, the best way for me to explain it to you is to tell you a little story. This is actually the first story that was ever told to me, that I can remember being told to me, and the first story I ever tried to tell. My grandma told it to me about something that happened to her when she was a little girl. She was 5 years old, and one day she was walking home from school along a dusty country road in rural Illinois, about 1910. She's walking home, and not far from her back door, from the back gate that led to her kitchen, she passed a slope of high grass that ran down to a pond. And on this day, a gaggle of large geese were gathered there at the edge of the pond. And as my grandma walked by the pond, for some reason, the geese decided to come charging up out of the water, through the grass, and at my grandma. Now, if you've ever seen a mad goose, it is a frightening sight to behold, particularly if you're only 5 years old. And these geese, for whatever reason, were mad, and they were coming after my grandmother, and my grandma took off at a run, and those geese started following her, their little webbed feet flapping along, their big giant wings a-flapping, their beaks a-honking and a-honking, and my grandma was running, and those geese were honking, and finally my grandma reached the back gate, burst through, and there, thank God, was her mother, standing on the back steps, wearing an apron. And when she saw the geese, who followed my grandma into the backyard, she stepped down off the stoop, grabbed the hem of her kitchen apron, and went shoo shoo shoo. And the geese ran away, and my grandma got cookies. That was the story, and I loved it. I loved how my grandmother's mother, my great-grandmother, was able to shoo those geese away by simply grabbing the edges of her apron and going shoo shoo shoo, and that my grandma got cookies. Now, that's how the story was told to me, but that's not how my grandma had to tell it. She could have told it this way. She could have said, "Now listen to me, Billy. One day when I was only 5 years old, I was walking home from school, and I must tell you, I was a very good girl. I wasn't making noise. I wasn't causing problems. I was just walking home from school innocently as anything. And as I was walking home, it just so happened my walk took me past this pond, where on this day a gaggle of evil geese was gathered. And for no reason whatsoever, without any provocation from me, as I was walking home, innocently mind you, those geese, in their evil little brains, decided that I was their enemy. And on this day, they came charging up out of the grass at me. Their little wicked geese eyes a-flaring, their giant wings a-beating, their big feet a-flapping, and they were coming at me. I could have pecked my eyes out. I didn't know what they were going to do. They were bigger than I. Gathered all together, they could have stomped me to death. And I started running, and they started running, and they were flapping, and they were honking, and I was running, and I burst through the back gate. Thank God my mom was there, and she shooed them away with her apron. But I'll tell you, I will never forget those geese and how they charged me for no reason whatsoever. I will never forget that you're never really safe. So here we have two very different stories. Same events, same physical arc, and same, I guess, emotional arc, but very different. And how I told that story, every choice I made about the details, was dependent on the intentional arc I was trying to share with the reader. So that is what the intentional arc is. What is trying to be shared? Why the story was told? And every decision a writer makes influences what the characters do or don't do, what they lose or don't lose, how they change or don't change. That's the intentional arc. But how do you teach it? Well, tune into part 2 and 3, and I will help teach you how you can teach these two arcs to your students. Thanks.